Hello, my name is Charles, and this is another episode of Charles' Weekly Party. So, before I start talking about things today, let's roll the intro. Alright, so today, I'm recording this on Easter, so if you celebrate, Happy Easter. And I figured for the discussion today, I'd talk about a little Easter egg in Shanghai, China, which is the renovation of Sinopec's, of number one Sinopec Gas Station. All right, and before I go further, I'm going to apologize if you can hear a little bit of echo today. I am in a different recording spot, but I can't say the echo is a lot better. It's definitely not as bad as the last spot, and I don't think there will be as much room noise, but it could be better. And if you're watching the video, I'm sure you've noticed that the lighting is not necessarily spectacular, but I am in a 100% daylit space, and of course, there's no such thing as blinds in this 100% daylit space, which would have been intelligent, but they aren't here. So, it's another week of let's try other recording spots to see what works out best. So, back to the renovation of number one Sinopec Gas Station. So, it was designed by GGAD Original Design Studio, and I've appreciated some of the works that they've done over in China. And as previously mentioned, the building in mention is located in Shanghai, China. So, why on earth am I talking about a gas station on Easter? So, first, when you think about an Easter egg that you might get on Easter, you see the egg, you don't know what's inside of it. Or maybe you have an idea of what's inside of it, but not necessarily. It could be something else entirely, you don't know. So, with the what's the name for it? With this gas station, it's on a map. You'd basically be seeing a gas station, right? So if you say, let's say you're going somewhere and you get navigation to the nearest gas station, and this pops up. First, when you first see this, it looks like anything but a gas station, and it's really interesting to that effect. And if you see it from the other side of it and you don't know it's a gas station, you won't necessarily realize it's a gas station. So one could almost say the building is sort of a Venn diagram because it is a two-faced building. So the building itself separates the gas station from the, what's the word for it? From the riverfront, right? And I've seen before when you have beautiful river scenery and then you see a gas station, doesn't necessarily look quite right. But this building sort of changed that. You have access to the convenience store from both sides, and the convenience store has access to the coffee shop located on the second level. So doing that means that the coffee shop has minimal view to the gas station, but it has full riverside view and full outside scenery. Right? So first, if you're taking a boat ride by it, it looks a lot better that way. So realistically, what that does is it allows both sides of the building to be public, but it makes sure that you're not seeing just another gas station from the river point of view. So, with that being said, the gas station, as I've mentioned, it's a gas station, it's a convenience store, it's a coffee shop, and it also has office space located on the first floor. So when they say mini mart, it's a mini mart. You have small area that's actually for the, forgetting the word for the convenience store. And then off to the side, you have office space for the management and whatnot. So I think it's definitely an interesting little combination, placing all those together. Right? And imagine the last time you went to a gas station and thought about sitting down and having coffee. Most of us think of a gas station as a temporary stopping point to go get gas, maybe if we're on a road trip, get some food or snacks, and get out. And this sort of takes that and turns it on its head. You have a gas station, but it's not just a gas station. And realistically speaking, I think that's really the future that we're heading towards. I also do kind of want to note out that the gas station has the pumps coming down from the ceiling. So you can't run into the pump, the panel comes down. And it's apparently, from the pictures I've seen, it's out of reach until you're actually using it to fuel. So I guess when you pay for the fuel and select the one you're using, the pump will lower itself down so that you can actually reach it, which I think is interesting. Maybe extra work for the gas pumping system. Realistically speaking, even though that's a gas station, I believe it's sort of hinting at a new future, right? With electric vehicle use on the rise, we're going to have to stare a couple of things in the face. First off, right now, EV chargers aren't necessarily out and about as much as we'd like. And we'd need more EV stations than we would need gas pumps if we have the level of cars running electric that we currently have running gas. And the reason for that is because with a gas station, I know as long as the pump's moving, it's maybe a 5-minute stop and then I'm gone. For some EVs, I believe the charging is fast, giving you a decent run on just 20 minutes worth of charge. But if you need to get a full charge and you're sitting there for an hour, let's say you need 1 hour to get a full charge, running some fast charging mechanism. Imagine you have a fast charging mechanism that allows you to charge an electric vehicle in an hour, right? Now, 5 minutes to fuel up with gas. That means every hour, each gas pump can serve 12 people. Which means if you're going to have the same level of efficiency for electric vehicles, you'd need, for every gas pump that's in an area, and if you see certain times that they are very, very busy, during these busy times, you need 12 times as many EV stations as you do gas pumps. And that's a lot, because I know gas stations where I am, there are a couple of larger ones that have 12 gas pumps. 12 times 12 is 144. And that's more than they have in parking spaces in that lot. So an EV future is going to be interesting on quite a few levels, but that means, let's say it takes an hour, no one's going to, it will get tiresome very quickly having to sit in your car for an hour on your phone. Just sit there, go through stuff that's not necessarily entertaining. maybe in the future, what we end up having, we have things like this gas station where you have a spot to park your EV so you can charge it, and then a spot to sit back, relax, get some coffee, and maybe have access to free Wi-Fi, other little amenities. I think last week when I mentioned the library, having a laptop bar. I think that could be a useful feature in the future of EV stations. Right now, there are a few here, there, and everywhere. Maybe you go park to go to the mall, you have one there. But maybe someone parking doesn't want it, someone's on the go, they don't want to just have to go into a store to charge their vehicle. You don't want to have to wait an hour to charge your vehicle. Waiting, and if every time I had to charge my vehicle I had to go into a store, that wouldn't sit well with me. And of course, this future is going to need to be something we look at carefully, because yeah, we can have charging stations in our driveway, but the other thing to think about is figuring out how to charge effectively and efficiently. And on a road trip, you won't always be able to do it. So right now, the biggest hurdle to EVs becoming a widespread thing is more of the road trip capabilities. And also, I'd say size, because to the best of my knowledge right now, you don't have something along the lines of a full-size Chevy Tahoe that runs on electric. And for let's say you have a family of 4, you need decent room, unless everyone's going to be miserable for the entire trip. And obviously, the more space, the more you're going to need to charge things up. So I think it's an interesting future to think about, and we're going to need to start thinking about this before it becomes a problem. Otherwise, I think California is set to, in 2035, require all new cars being sold to be electric. They are going to need a lot of solutions to do that. They're going to need things like these EV stations running off of solar. And that's not necessarily going to be easy. I think what everyone's going to need to do is everyone's going to need to go and start switching and adding in solar in lots of different areas, adding in other forms of energy generation. I think some of the EVs are getting better now with regenerative braking, but we're still going to need more. And if we don't do that, then we are in deep, deep, deep trouble. But I think that, for me, that's enough about where we're headed with electric vehicles. And I know I started off on a gas station, but I think that captures the future. New vehicles, especially electric ones, are going to be very difficult to produce. Well, we're in a chip shortage, not a ship shortage. Yeah, doing English real nice today. While we are currently in the chip shortage, we're going to need to figure things out. And yes, I'm talking about this again. For good or for bad, Cisco's CEO has stated that, to the best of his knowledge, we're not going to be out of this for at least a year. And from the research I've been doing, I agree with that, and I think maybe more than a year before everything's actually fully up and running. Because the chip shortage we are currently experiencing is for a multitude of reasons. First off, yes, there are new facilities being built for the purpose of making chips. And yes, they're going to be able to do so, but not right away. I think that's going to take at least a couple of years to produce. So maybe those facilities will be running by 2023. So I'll let you do the math on that. And also, another thing that really killed it is in advance of COVID, car manufacturers decreased the amount of chips that they requested because they thought, well, people are going to be asked to stay indoors, so there's going to be less car demand. So we're going to need less chips and less cars. All I can say to that is, oops. Public transit is, in the age of COVID, a nightmare. To take a bus from here to there, let's say 30 minutes, you're sitting next to someone. Technically, by CDC guidelines, if you're not 6 feet away from them, if you've been sitting there for more than 15 minutes, congratulations, you are now in close contact. All right? Now, another piece to keep an eye open for is, that killed it, was the increase in devices that were needed for school and work, right? And I can say without a doubt that chip supply not only stayed steady, but it increased more than anyone was expecting. With the increased demand for all of these chips, it's gotten interesting because normally the facilities that produce these chips run at, I believe, 70 to 80% capacity. So in essence, they're operating at 70% or 80% of what they can actually produce. With the chip shortage, many of these places have been doing 100% capacity, which sets up the road for failure. Right? Reason to do 80% is so that in the event that something needs maintenance, you shift things over and you're not behind on anything. Imagine you have 10 supply lines, 10 production lines that you can use to make chips, right? Now, let's say a piece of equipment breaks down on one of them, so you shift over to one of the manufacturing lines that isn't currently being used. Let's say you alternate on which two aren't being used to sort of even out the wear on everything. And so you don't have one supply line that's just sitting twiddling its thumbs, and then the moment you need it to work, it can't work, because then that's a different disaster, right? So let's say you're just working off of those 8 supply lines. One goes down, you switch to another one. You're still working on 8 supply lines, you're maintaining one. And the tricky part is when you do 100%, let's say you're operating at all 10 of those, that's different. When you have maintenance, you can't do anything. You're out of luck. SOL. So that's right about where we are on that. So, summary, some people said we're going to need less chips, and so they didn't get the amount of chips that they were going to request, and other people picked up the slack and said, okay, we'll get more chips. So the industry was able to fulfill all the orders that were originally placed, but all the new orders, those are a little bit trickier. So while I'm on the topic of computer chips, Intel's 11th generation of chips, which I previously mentioned, now have reviews out on them. When I first talked about them, the benchmarks were still under embargo. I'm going to make very short work of saying this. One reviewer titled the new Intel chips a waste of sand. And looking at the benchmarks, different chips suit different purposes on the benchmark scale, so some chips are better at some things than others. But realistically speaking, the Intel i9 ends up trading blows with the top of the line AMD chip. So some things it's better at, some things it's not so great at. And I think realistically, if you're interested in buying a computer chip, I'd really suggest looking at the reviews. The 11th generation is getting better, but it's not quite there yet. Part of it is that one of those chips, or the whole Rocket Lake generation, is something that's been in the works before its new leadership got in. And I'm looking forward to seeing where the new leadership brings things to, because the laptop processors I mentioned are at a 10 nanometer scale. The desktop chips were supposed to be, but they didn't. And why is that? Simply put, they weren't able to pull it off and needed to backport to the 14 nanometer design. So it's an interesting hybrid. But hopefully, Team Blue will be pulling through on these chips. And since I still feel like talking about chips, it's currently rumored that the Google Pixel 6 could use a chip made by Google instead of one normally made by Qualcomm. And further on, I believe it was a leak, but because it's a leak, it's not 100% guaranteed truth, but it's supposedly designated GS101 and codenamed Whitechapel. And GS supposedly stands for Google Silicon, which really, that's an Apple play. Apple came up with the whole Apple Silicon thing. So Google doing it, I think I have mixed feelings about it, because anyone should be able to say, our company, Silicon, end of story. But that's not where we are. But Google isn't on their own. Amazon and Microsoft are also, in theory, working on their own chips. So pretty soon, all three of the biggest internet companies, all three of the largest companies will be producing their own chips, which will be very interesting. So, if I may, the Pixel 6 will certainly be running on a version of Android. And let's just say, recently there's been a study, and recently being this past week, that shows that Android supposedly sends 1 megabyte of data versus Apple's 42 kilobytes of data. That's a big difference. So in theory, there are a couple of flaws in the analysis, in that, what was it? The Android phone was on Android 10 versus iOS 13.6.1. So maybe it had updates on the Android, not sure one way or the other, but both operating systems were released in September of 2019, but the specific iOS version that was being used, had an August 2020 update. So Google said that they have their objections, that it was actually 20 times more, and they were the ones citing the coming up with the flaws that they saw. But despite citing the methodology that was used to get the results, a Google spokesperson, wow, really doing well today. A Google spokesperson, completely off the record, said that as far as they're concerned, Google seems to think that most of that research study is accurate. So I'd call that a data problem. I'm not the first person to say it, but I think it would be a data problem because, especially when you're paying for that, if it's sending 20 times more, you're paying. And if you're paying for the data, that's not doing you any favors. Really, it isn't. So I really can't wait to see where this ends up going. Maybe Google will lower the things, but I don't know. It's all up in the air as to what ends up happening. But the bigger concern should be that both operating systems collect data right upon startup and send it off to Apple or Google respectively, running iOS or Android. And that there's no way to shut the data off. So, personally, I have an Apple device that I hope sends off certain location data to Apple for the sake of me being able to track down the device, because I know I do not want to have to pay to replace the device. I'd rather be able to track the thing down. So, big oops on that. So, also, when that data first gets sent, that will contain the IP address of the user. And that means that whoever, or Apple or Google or whomever else is receiving the information, can get your geographic or general geographic location. They're sending this with the basic geographic information of someone. That can be slightly concerning in itself. Yes, I allow some of my data to be used in such a sense so I can figure out where my things are. But at the same time, let's say I have the means to be able to easily replace a device if it's lost. Say, oh, phone fell out of or lost the phone, oh well. But I can see where it's useful, but I can also see where it can be detrimental to the user. So I know it's been an interesting week. There were a few things I wanted to talk about, but from gas stations and the future of possible EV stations to the silicon we're going to need to run all of that. Life is only going to get more interesting. So, and right about here is when I usually give my partie for the week. And realistically speaking, what is my partie for the week? I think it's just have patience and enjoy the hidden little features that you get. So, they may not mean much, but altogether, count your blessings, enjoy everything, and have fun. So, now, if you enjoyed this episode of Charles Weekly Partie, if you aren't already, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you go to anchor.fm/Charles Weekly Partie, you can listen to the podcast, all episodes. You can interact by leaving voice messages, or you can support the podcast. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you enjoyed, and subscribe so you Well, I already said that. So, yep. Just make sure that if you want to see the action, not like there's necessarily much to see besides me talking, you can do it on YouTube. So, that's been my weekly partie. Take care. Roll the outro.